Welcome to the Customer Wins podcast, where business leaders discuss their secrets and techniques for helping their customers succeed and in turn grow their business.
Hi, I'm Rich Walker, the host of the Customer Wins, where I talk to business leaders about how they help their customers win and how their focus on customer experience leads to growth. Some of our past guests have included David Knock, the CEO of DocuPace, and Philip Hecker of Bento Engine. Today, I get to speak with Robert Kirk, founder and CEO of InterGen Data. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Quick, the leader in enterprise forms processing. When the last step to earn your client's business requires processing forms, don't ruin a good relationship with a bad experience. Instead, get Quick Forms to make processing forms a great experience and the easiest part of your transaction. Visit quickforms.com to get started. So before I introduce today's guest, I have to give a big thank you to the team at DocuPace for introducing me to Robert many years ago. Go check out their website at docupace.com. All right, I'm so excited to talk to Robert. Robert Kirk is an accomplished technologist, leader, and industry expert in wealth management. With over 30 years of wealth management experience, starting with trading and then moving into tech, Robert has led several firms in their implementation of technology and to play a critical role in helping those firms grow. Since 2018, Robert is the founder and CEO of InterGen Data, where he is creating, developing, implementing, and disrupting the banking, financial service, and insurance industries. He has built a proprietary life stage, life event artificial intelligence engine, which helps companies predict when clients are likely to have a major life event so advisors can serve their clients better. Rob, welcome to the Customer Wins.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here. Great seeing you again, and happy to share whatever it is we talk about with your audience.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I hope our audience is too, because if they haven't heard this podcast before, I talk with leaders like you about what they're doing to help their customers win, how they built and deliver a great customer experience, and the challenges to growing their own company. Rob, I want to understand your business a little bit better. How does your company help people?
Great question to start with. We are a company that was founded because of a life event. My grandfather at the time was getting old, and we needed to have him go live out his days with his daughter, which is my mom. But he ended up shortly thereafter getting Alzheimer's, and we had to move him into a long-term care facility. Now, this is back in 2009 to about 2013. And we just weren't prepared. We weren't prepared physically or emotionally. No one ever is, right? You're just dealing with this and you're trying to figure out how to help a loved one. But then we also realized very shortly thereafter that it was just, we weren't prepared financially or legally. In fact, not prepared so much that even when we looked at the cost of a long-term care facility, plus medication and special treatment, it was $14,400 a month. And this happened for over 4 years. That's close to $680,000, $690,000. This is a number that should just blow away anyone in the US and say, are you prepared? Well, we weren't, and I don't think most of the US is. So I started to look at the industry and say, well, I looked inward and first said, who's worse than me? I'm working in technology. I'm deploying tech. I'm building tech. I'm helping advisors and CPAs and estate planners, but I couldn't help my own family. So I sat there and I said, there's got to be, why? Why can't I help? What's going on? So I looked at the planning systems, the risk systems, the asset allocation tools. And what I shortly realized was there's a gap, simple gap. There's a lack of data. There's a lack of data around, hey, these events are likely to happen to you, and here's how much they cost. And here's what you need to do, and here's how much they impact you. And that data wasn't available. And I looked at the systems, and this isn't nefarious. These systems are great systems, but they didn't have this data, and they relied on the advisor to ask the questions. I'm sorry, but Rich, no one came up to me and said, hey, can you tell me when do you plan to have your grandfather get Alzheimer's? When do you plan to have your spouse get cancer? I mean, nobody does that, right? We're people. And in fact, if you told me, hey, this just happened, most people would go, oh, I need to shy away, and you go away. So we realized, though, this is the most important time right there at that moment for an advisor to say, that's okay. I know other situations like this, and people like you tend to go through this. Let me
Mhm.
help you. So I built the company to provide that data, to give an edge to the advisors, to help the firms, but more importantly, to help the clients understand it's going to be okay. You can get through this.
Rob, you said so many important things in there that I want to reflect on. Number one, I don't know if everybody really thinks about this as clients of advisors. Advisors really, really care. And a lot of them come from a background of wanting to help their own families, and that's why they want to help your families. So I love that this is the origin story that you have. Second, when you were talking about these life events, I got my life insurance designation. I went and got the agent thing. And talking to somebody about death is really hard, but I would bet talking about disablement or cancer or these life events that are affecting end of life and comfort, et cetera, it's probably even harder simply because we all know we're all going to die. We don't know if we're all going to get Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
So how did you figure out how to put this data together so that you could give these insights?
That was to say the least, it was a passion of pain. I had to go through tons of data. So this is back in 2013. I started looking for data sets. Today, the data is so much better than it was back then, but I would literally go through government documents. I would go through hospital documents, cancer research documents. I would go through PDFs,
I
tons
mean,
and
you're
tons.
reading all these things and learning, or
Reading all these things, exactly. Reading all these things and learning. Then I would try to investigate where the data was. Where could I get access to the data? Is it public data? Is it private data? Could I purchase the data? How much was the data? And so I started cutting my first checks back in 2014 to tell people, or to tell my team, hey, I found this data set. I just purchased it. Can you tell me what can we do from a machine learning aspect? Now, when we look at machine learning back then, what we were doing is rather simplistic, but it's very important. We would look at all the data. So we would get all the people who died of, let's just say, cancer, and pick a cancer, it doesn't matter. We picked one. Tell me all the data of all the births. Tell me all the data of all the people who bought their first car, when they bought their first car. So we would get the data specific to that based on the research that I did, that we did, and then we would find the data set and put that into the computer. The computer and the machine learning aspect, we use a Bayesian approach. And all that means is that we're looking at history to see if we can predict the future, kind of like you're looking at stock charts or
yeah.
financials. And what we started to do is to say, can I predict and find the most common things that help me understand, like when somebody makes the most amount of money in their life, when
Hmm.
somebody has their first child. And then can I break that apart by, well, is it because I'm of this type of a person? I'm Native American Indian, my wife is Korean, or maybe it's my type of job, maybe it's where I live. So we started breaking the data apart and segmenting it until we found patterns. Once we found those patterns, could we use that data to say, I want to predict from year 20 to 19? And then does that hold true for 19 to 18, 18 to 17, and then 20 to 19 to 18 to 17? So we use the machine to do what's good, what a computer can do really well, read a ton of data, see correlations, see data, and say, hey, this is highly correlated or it's completely disparate. You don't need to think about it. And that's what we do. And that's kind of how we started.
So in my career of running my software company for 20 years, I've had several different dark moments. Like, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if all this investment I'm making is going to pay off and turn into a product. How dark was this for you?
It was dark enough that I had to tell my wife I'm about to spend X amount of dollars, and I had to get her blessing. And she said, okay, so remember that trip, remember that car, remember this stuff you wanted? It's no. And it was
Yeah.
that decision. It's the decision of, do I really want to put my money where my mouth is and say, this is what I believe? The moment I cut the check, the moment I wrote that, it was probably the most stark moment. I say stark, not dark. And here's why. Because at that point, I said, if this works, we can help so many people. If it doesn't work, I'm going to have to work a few more years to get back to where I was.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting for me. And it started the path of me being the entrepreneur. Every day, it's a great exhilaration, the most promising time, but the most frustrating and painful time at the same time. So I have to deal with it.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I started my first business at age 12. And so I get it, and I love it, and it's not for everybody. And I'm really, really glad that you took this on. So I have insight that our audience doesn't have yet, because I saw you at T3 and you gave me a full perspective on what you've been building. And honestly, it's phenomenal. So I want to dive deeper into it. How many data points are you now collecting?
We're approaching 15 billion data points.
Wow. Wow. And so what kind of life events are you now predicting, and how accurate do you feel these predictions are?
So let's go with the accuracy part first. The accuracy part is every one of our predictions has to meet, going back to that Bayesian approach, 20 to 19, 19 to 18, it has to hit 94% or higher before we release it and say, we believe we can do this prediction. There are some firms out there, and I don't need to name names, but you've got to think of it in terms of percentages. If someone says, hey, I'm 75% accurate, that's good, but flip it around. I've got a 1 in 4 chance of dying. That's not so good, right? So the better the accuracy, the more finite we can drive the actual prediction to you. So you versus me, even if we're the same age, making the same amount of money, but we're living in 2 different areas, we're likely to have 2 different sets of data. And that's typically what we found. So it has to be 94% accurate to the individual. So for me, 54, Native American Indian, CEO of financial services, in Dallas, Texas. It has to be that relevant and at that 94% accuracy. So that's the second part to your question. The first part is really, we're now at the point where we have 95 different life events. So if we look at them in 2 major categories, the first category are things that we call wealth. These are things like, when are you going to get married? Who are you likely to get married to? How many children? Potentially, how many divorces? How many other marriages? How many children for each marriage?
No, wait a second here. People go to psychics to find out how many children they're going to have. How are you predicting how many kids somebody's going to have?
So we have the statistics that I'll go through and tell you by your education level, by your demographic, by who you are, by where you live, who you're likely to meet. So as an example, the easiest example is, who did doctors marry? Doctors marry doctors and nurses. Why? Because that's in their sphere of influence. That's who they're around every day. And who do nurses marry? Doctors and first responders. Well, who do first responders marry? They marry nurses, and then who do they marry? School admin people, because that's who they're around every day. It's like saying, hey, Rich, you're likely to marry some supermodel from Italy. Well, if you're not a cameraman, if you're not working in the film industry, if you're not flying across to Italy, your likelihood of meeting that person is 0. Now, from the data perspective, if you get married or you get divorced, you have to fill out paperwork. That paperwork gets submitted to the government, so they know who you are. They know your race, they know your gender, they know your job, they know where you live, they know what you make, they know all of the things about your marriage and divorce. Think of all the paperwork that you have to do. That data is publicly available.
Wow.
Other parts of it are not, but we combine all the data sets, and that's how we start to plug in the data.
All right. So sorry for interrupting. Keep going. So your wealth building, you have these events that affect your wealth building.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's also number of car purchases, home purchases, when you start businesses, or how much money you're likely to make. I mean, that's wealth related. On the health related side, it's 81 critical illnesses. So not just cancer, but 27 types of cancer, 22 types of heart issues. We have brain issues like Alzheimer's and dementia. And the Alzheimer's, that's key to me because that's what my grandfather went through. And we do this, if you want to think about this from a predictive standpoint, all of these are genetically based types of, or what we would say inherent into your own DNA, that get passed down generation to generation. And fortunately for us, the US government says there's really 2 different ways you can do these types of critical illness predictions. The first is DNA. but no one's going to go to a bank. No one's going to go to Charles Schwab and get their blood drawn and have it spun around and, sequence somebody's genes. But the other way, and that is, by the way, the best way to understand your critical illnesses or what you're likely to get disease-wise. From the other way, which they recommend, it's really to look at your heritage, look at your past generations, your parents, your grandparents, maternal and paternal, because these genetic diseases increase your likelihood. And they're finding, smoking is more genetic. They're finding other areas such as like the BRCA gene or hair loss. These are genetic traits. So we use that data, create a math model, and then basically say, based on who you are, where you live, what you do, what other influences, these are the things, and here's a probability and prevalence of these diseases or illnesses according or specific to you.
Wow. Wow. So if you're an advisor leveraging this data, and I'm presuming an advisor could leverage this data, are you asking your client to provide a bunch of metrics that then you plug in and evaluate and predict? How does it actually translate to a customer?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways of doing this. One, just know that we don't want the advisor to become a doctor. We're not asking them, we don't want to show them all the data unless they're the true data science guy and they want to go into all the nth degree of what we do. We're happy to walk them down that path. But most people, what they need to do is they need to understand people like you, Rich, living where you live, doing what you do. Here's typically some of the things that you're going to go through at your life stage. And that's big data coming in and giving you very big insights. Your children might be going to college. You might have just moved. You might become an empty nester. Here's the products and services that most people like you need. Now let's get specific. So have you had questions or thoughts about critical illnesses? Because that's something that typically happens to people your age. It may not be you, but it might be your family. And all of a sudden it becomes conversational. You're like, that's interesting. My grandmother had cancer. My mom has just gone in for a biopsy. I wonder what that means. Well, instantly right there, that's all the data we need. My maternal grandparent, my mother, and then all of a sudden you start building that mathematical formula. So we do it in that sense where an advisor can be empowered to ask these questions, or they can use our UI to kind of tap through and say, this is what they've had. But from that perspective, it's very light. It's really just, did your parents have arthritis? How about your grandparents on your maternal, paternal side? And just that simple question, yes, no, one, or both, that's all we need. And then we get started. We've already done the heavy lifting and the predictions already ahead of time. So now that's just access to the insight.
Okay. So what kind of companies are leveraging your data? And do you have a favorite customer success stories you might tell?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ones. And I have to be careful. I can't name the customer, but what I can do is I can tell you this. So banks, clearing firms, insurance companies, home healthcare companies, they've been the biggest users of our data. We have a couple of success stories that we think are really, really key. One is from a group insurance perspective. We were able to help a company that is looking at their benefits that they provide. And we were able to help the broker who's helping them decide what benefits they need to actually try and use throughout the year. The open enrollment comes every October. It's a really horrible time. You go in and it's PDF purgatory. You click, click, click PDF, click, click, click PDF. And then you're sitting there saying, I don't know what to do. And so I go to somebody and I go, Rich, what did you pick? High deductible, low deductible, this insurance, how much, right? And it ends up becoming a really tough thing because you're going through that, not knowing sure exactly what you should pick. But Rich, we're not the same, but I'm still asking as if we were. So what we were able to do was take the data from this company. We do not take in PII, so it's de-identified, anonymized data. And then what we did is we helped them look at their employee population and say, hey, 42% of your population is really good. They've got the right product mix. They've got the right insurance. That's great. Tell them, great job, thumbs up. This 15, 18%, this is kind of interesting. They're about to get older. They're not really hitting some things. A few bumps, $10 a month here will really help them, something really small. But then there's these two other groups, right? And it was almost, I think, 22, 28%, right around there, that literally meant, hey, these groups they're going to need a little bit more money. They're likely to have a lot more life events, illnesses. Now, that could be two things. It could help you on your downturn in terms of customer, or let's just call it productivity. You have productivity hit from a company perspective, but you also have employees you want to take care of. Hey, we should really start helping you this way. Let's look at other things we can do, dietary needs. Maybe we give you other benefits to help you start working out or do something differently. Various ways that they can really humanize benefits to say, this is for you. We were able to provide that because we found a $20 million gap within about 35% of their employees between the insurance that they're likely going to need and claim over the next 5 years versus what they have today. So tell them today in advance. That's one of the great things we were able to do. And then I'll give you one other.
Well, before we get that, if there was a $20 million gap, did that mean the company, the employer, had to buy more insurance? Did it mean it had to offer more products? Did it mean that you could inform the employees to buy up their products? What did it mean actually?
It actually meant that they were able to give them information that says, hey, we've identified that people like you tend to go through this. You may want to consider more insurance. You may want to consider this for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, or even 10 years. So it gave them an opportunity where the employer is looking out for the employee. What we didn't want to do, and this was many of the conversations, is tell them, you have to tell them they have to buy this. No, you don't have to. But if the employer didn't offer it, well, there's two choices. The employer could then offer it and say, hey, 50% of our company's going to need this, let's give it to them, right? That's a great thing. That means they're looking out. The other side would be, let's say on the contra side to that, let's say it's only 5%. That 5% say it's not big enough for us to offer it, but work with the broker and say, get us a good deal. So you're the company asking the broker, get us a good deal for this group of people, help them out. So now what you're doing is you're giving them the ability to buy up, but still buy something that they need. It's really about taking care of the person, the employee.
Yeah, and having the opportunity to understand it so that you can address it well before you need it. Like, you don't want to buy long-term care the day you need it. You got to buy it ahead of time.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the learnings we, so sadly, and this is for anyone who knows anybody, if you're going to put somebody into a long-term care facility, their money needs to be in a trust 5 years before that actual date.
Wow.
If it's not done 5 years, if it's 4 years, 364 and a half days, and you just miss it, the government has the ability to take all of the money. You sell the house, they take it all. They take all the bank, they take all the savings. So if it's not put in trust, and that 5-year rule, the only way you know about it is if somebody tells you, or you've missed the date and somebody has gone through it, and we went through it. So we missed the date, and the government, unfortunately, they took all of my grandfather's capital. So nothing you can do. You have to live with it.
Yeah. Yikes. Wow. So I interrupted you because you had another story you wanted to tell, which I'd love to hear.
Oh, so the other success story, which we found really interesting, is in a marketing scenario. We had a company who wanted to know more about their customers, and what they wanted to do was really simple. They wanted to go market this specific product to them, and they said, here, we're going to give you this data. You tell us about the customer. You rank and prioritize who we should go after. They gave us about 15,000 names. Within that, we identified 500 they should go after. We said, this is the group. Don't worry about everybody else. This is the group. Now, this company is a large insurance company, record keeper. They're well-known, very big in the industry. And their initial data came through. They have a very high open rate of 25.9% for their emails. That's way above anyone that I know of. They are probably, I would say, probably the best in the world. We were fortunate to work with them. They gave us the opportunity. We went through, prioritized those names, and with our data, we had an open rate of 48.7%.
Wow.
We almost doubled what they were able to do, which meant two things. One, we identified the right group, that this is top of mind, that what their product was fit their needs. Then, as you know, comes the next thing. Well, what's the call to action? What's the next thing? What are they going to do next? So we both went through and we went, okay, this is going to be great. Yes. And this is a tale of being an entrepreneur. You'll get this. We said, oh, we're going to look forward to the numbers. And we both came in at the call to action next step at under 1%. And we're like, what happened? What? How do you go from 50% opening it to less than 1%? And then we realized it was one of the analysts spoke on the phone and said, well, you did send this during Thanksgiving and Christmas. They're probably spending them. And we went, oh, that's a good point. So you have to laugh, right? But so what we did is we did another A/B test with their group. We sent out the data again. We saw similar rates on the open. So we knew we were identifying the right people, different group. And now we're going to measure and see how that next group comes in. So we think over the next few months, we'll have a full 6 months of data that says initial onset, initial open rate, follow through, purchase. So it's the tale of, yes, everything is great. Oh, everything failed. No, wait, it's still good.
That's still the entrepreneur's journey.
Exactly, 100%.
Wow. Okay, look, I want to switch gears a little bit because you are into AI. You've built your own AI, which I don't meet a lot of people who have. There's a lot of leveraging of AI, but building your own data sets, et cetera, is really impressive. But I want to ask you a slightly different question. Do you see AI with the kind of data you're doing possibly changing how people buy products like insurance? I mean, today the 80-20 rule applies, right? 80% of the people don't need it, 20% do, so it's all covered. But what if you go into this analysis and the insurer says, oh, Rich, we predict you're going to have cancer at age 55. We don't want you now. Do you see something like that happening?
So the regulatory agencies and the companies are very scared of that, right? You don't want to discriminate.
Yeah.
It's something that you shouldn't do. Now, we're at a really unique place. I love how you staged the question. We're at a really unique place because insurance companies and the actuaries themselves, they want to know this data. So a good example would be, I'm Native American Indian. I have a higher propensity for type 2 diabetes at the average age of 54. I'm 54. For the last few years, since I've known this data, I've started cutting out my sugar. Do I still need to lose weight? Absolutely. Am I on that path? Yeah, but I'm more cognizant of it. That's going to help lengthen my longevity. So in that sense, my wife, who's Korean, well, guess what? She has a higher propensity for cancer. I don't, she does. And in fact, she did get cancer a few years ago. And thank God she's in complete remission, but she got 2 cancers at once, which is almost. So she goes through that. Well, some people might say, well, you can't provide data to me as a Native American Indian, and you can't provide data to that person who's Korean and a female, because that might, infect or affect the way we might want to market to them, or how do we say? No, I want to know this because you know what? My children are a mix of both.
Yeah.
They're going to have different propensity models. If you really want to help me, you want to help me prepare for my future. You don't want to help me prepare for the average, because Native American Indians or Koreans, we're not the same. Genetically, we're not the same, and that's okay. And by the way, male, female, we're not the same. Even if I have a sex change, even if I change my name, I have 0% chance of getting ovarian cancer. I can't get it, right?
Yeah.
There's certain things that we use within the math and the model and the data and the genetics, and it says, this is it. So if you're going to hide that data from me and not use it for me, then some might say, are you misleading? I'm not going to say people are lying. I'm not going to say people are this, but they might take that group mentality. But here's where this really gets interesting. Other states are trying to say, we need to make sure AI is unbiased. Well, how are you unbiased if you don't show the different disparate data sets of everybody?
Right.
If you're not transparent in that, then how do you prove unbiased?
Right.
Now, Colorado, New York, and they've already put bias laws out there. So this is already starting. So the reality is the data needs to be there. In my personal opinion, in our corporate, the way I'm driving the company is we want to show transparently the difference between us, not to show differences. It's to celebrate who we are, but also to plan. Because if we can plan better, we can help the individual. We might save more, we might do more. Guess what? We're going to live better lives.
Yeah.
That's the goal, whether it's insurance to protect a person, or whether it's accumulation, or whether it's decumulation. You want to show people we can help guide you up, save, and help you live, and then pass on that money to generations. The only way I think you can do it is to be transparent in the data. So we're at a really unique time where AI rules, group insurance type of mentality, data sets, AI, all of it is intertwined, and we're gonna come to a head. I believe I'm on the winning side, but we'll see.
I think you are, because I think what you said is important to repeat back, which is you as a person want to know the differences that are unique to you. And the corollary to that is going to a doctor. I wouldn't want a doctor to look at me differently than who I actually am. I wouldn't want to say, oh, well, you might be female when I'm definitely male, and try to treat me for female problems that are definitely not afflicting me, right? And we also know that there are propensities. My wife's a nurse. She was an ER nurse. And we know there are propensities for things like sickle cell. It affects a different population than others, or heart disease, et cetera. So I think it's fascinating to look at it from that standpoint. And, the corollary is there is not, as far as I know, an insurance product out there for white males in their 50s versus, white females in their 40s. I haven't heard of that product.
So it is funny because, and that's ultimately the question. You don't want to discriminate. So do you create disparate products? Well, in some cases, actuaries have enough data. They could do that. They could create multiple products all over.
Yeah.
I would, and other places say, no, that's bad. You're going to inherently create this bias or whatnot. And I laugh because I say, look, if I went out and let's say both of us are the same age, living in the same city, doing the same thing, making the same amount of money, but I get 10 tickets a month for speeding and you don't get any, I guarantee you my rate goes up.
Yeah.
I guarantee you I'm paying more. I guarantee you at a point, they're going to cancel my insurance. Also, if we lived in the same place, but I lived on the side of the volcano and you lived down by, by the sea, I'm probably going to pay more if it maybe not get, insurance for the home. Same thing for floodplains. So it's interesting to me that we can be, I'm going to say it this way, biased in those types of things. But when it comes down to my health, why not?
Yeah.
COVID, let's go back to the behemoth, right? What did that teach us? It taught us that black, brown, yellow, green, purple, whatever, people of color got affected more than people who were white. There's nothing wrong with that. We just need to know how to treat it. But if you're trying to tell me that I'm the average white person, I'm not. No,
right.
Not in a negative sense, in a way that says, help me, help protect me, help insure me, help me accumulate money, help me save money, help my family. That's what I want.
I love this perspective. Okay, I have one more data question for you that's been burning in my mind. Is your data only US data? I mean, what happens if you have an immigrant from India or South Africa or Australia? How does your data model affect that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to phrase that. So today, about 90% of our data, and I say this in total, right? So let me state it in the simplest manner. Yes, we're US centric. However, we're collecting data now from Canada, from the UK, from Singapore. After COVID, all of these countries started producing more data and producing it in a way that helped understand how the disease and how all the comorbidities, because it wasn't just the disease, it was the disease plus, or the virus plus comorbidities that made it exponential. So whether I was hospitalized or died, it really, really affected us. So within that, they're making this data available and we're starting to collect all of that. Now, to the real, I guess you would call it, central part of your question. If you're from India and you are Indian descent, and then you move to the US, you're still Indian. Genetically, it's the same. Now, your propensity models are the same. The differences would be, okay, what type of job, the type of stress. So we're finding not just the genetics, we're also finding the type of job you have and where you live also influences the likelihood, probability, and prevalence of you, or not the prevalence is there, but the probability of you getting this disease. more stressful areas lead to higher types of cancer, lead to overeating, lead to over drinking, lead to, right? Versus if you have that less stress, it's not as much. So we see those pockets, you're still likely to get these diseases, but your probability isn't as high, and the type of food you eat. So all of this does play into account, but we still go with the basis. If I'm Japanese in Japan, or if I'm Japanese in Russia, I'm still Japanese in the US. There's no real difference.
Yeah, right.
So we see the model. Now we're going to try and see if it goes the other way too. And we're working with companies overseas to say, how does our model look there? Where can we grab the data? And then we'll have two sets of data, A and B, to then combine and run separately to see how it works. That's the beautiful
I guess
part.
another way I could have asked my question is America enough of a melting pot to have enough demographics and socioeconomic information to help somebody of another country who's immigrating here?
Yeah, it is. If you think about the population in terms of size, we're 70% white, we're 30% Hispanic or whatever. That's still a large enough population, because 30% of 330 million is actually quite
A lot of people.
population, right? So 20%, if you're Black or if you're Asian or if you're this, it's a large enough. The vastness of the US, meaning the disparate types of urban, suburban areas that we live in, as well as the types of stresses and models, it does provide a good proving ground, because you're talking about 330 million in a course of over 8 billion people. Statistically speaking, we're significant enough. But if you want to look at it, I would say this from my perspective, as a Native American Indian, there's only 2.643 million of us. We're the really, really tiny data set at that end. So it wouldn't be as good for us, but for the larger populations, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and there's still other things that are applicable. The fact of where you live, what kind of job you took, et cetera. Man, Rob, this has been so fascinating and interesting. And I really admire that you took a personal challenge and decided to build a business, a hard business, by the way, and risk it all and go for it. I love, love, love entrepreneurs like yourself for doing that. And we unfortunately have to wrap this up. So before I ask my very last question, I want to know, how should people connect with you? How do they find you?
Oh, it's really simple. So you can go to intergendata.com. If you go to About Us, you can see each of all the people that are on the team. Click link in with us. We're on LinkedIn. You can connect directly there, email us directly. So robert.kirk@intergendata.com. We even put out our phone numbers, my cell phone numbers out there, and gladly take calls from individuals. And I'll even be bold enough and say 917-680-8702. Be more than happy to speak to everybody and anyone. So feel free to reach out.
That is awesome. Man, you're so open. That is great. All right. Now, I still want to keep talking about this, but here's the last question. Who has had the biggest impact on your leadership style or how you approach your role today?
The gentleman that I would say has probably impacted me the most is an ex-colleague who then became my boss before I went out and started this company. His name was Indranil Roy. He's an ex-CTO, Barclays Japan, very well-known, ex-Citi. He's been the most influential. I would say that my life has been led in thirds. The first third of my life, I chased after what I thought was who I needed to be. I chased after the dollar and a person. The second third of my life, I followed a gentleman who is very well established and did very well in the industry, very well respected. But the last third was probably Indranil. He really sat down and helped me understand how to interact with people on a greater level, that no matter what happens, it's water on a duck's back, and that it just rolls off. And in the end, it was whenever you get into a disagreement or an argument or a thought about somebody, it's always think about them. If they're getting heated or that person is getting annoyed or mad, think of them as a little child and say, somewhere back in their history, they had a pain.
Mm-hmm.
Do that. You humanize them. You forget about your pride. You forget about your intentions, It's how can I help that person? Because my job as a leader was to help them, not to show them, teach them. It's not to be parochial. It's I want to see them succeed. And he taught me that the key to my success was their success. And that's what I would have to say. Indranil has been, he's a student of life, but he's also just an amazing man.
Man, that is so awesome. This is why I love asking this question. I love these types of stories and hearing all this. Rob, thank you. So I have to give a big thank you to Robert Kirk, CEO of InterGen Data, for being on this episode of the Customer Wins. Go check out Rob's website at intergendata.com. And don't forget to check out Quick at quickforms.com, where we make processing forms easy. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. We'll click the like button, share this with someone, and subscribe to our channels for future episodes of the Customers Win. Thanks for joining me today, Rob.
Awesome. I appreciate all the time, Rich. Peace out, man. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Wins podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.